You know, whenever I heard that Dawn was coming across to Ireland to spend some time with myself and my wife and Steve Mera, I thought, great, here comes another self-professed sensitive, um, no doubt with outlandish claims. But you know, getting to meet the guy and actually see the way that he worked, it really was a tremendous experience. You see, Ireland is rich in its living folklore and mythology, something which I knew he wouldn't be accustomed to. So I wanted to put him to the test. I wanted to see if I could break him down almost, understand how he worked. So I contrived 3 locations. Each had their own, I suppose, each had their own aspects on which they would test him to his fullest. The first, I gotta say, was to test Dawn. It was to see what Dawn brought to the table personally. And for that to happen, we had to go back in time to our prehistory, back to a Neolithic time, before the Great Pyramids of Giza. So we ended up at location at Carrakeel, which means narrow quarter, a place littered with passage chambers. Later years, they became burial chambers. But there was also a site that housed a place that was linked to some of our old gods, the Tuatha De Danann. I wanted to see what he would pick up from there, because there was nothing on the landscape that would give any clues to what he was expected to communicate with. And straight off the bat, on the way into Carrakeel, he stopped. He got Steve to stop the car, and he got out, and he started picking up on a village. And there is nothing there to indicate a village. It's completely gone, thousands of years before. But he was right. There was a village there. We then went up onto the top of the hill and back into the subchamber, which is linked to the Tuatha De Danann. And sure enough, there he started picking up on a type of doorway, something which, according to legend, indicated that it was there. So it was very interesting that he was able to pull this out. But more to the point, I was intrigued by the way he worked. It was interesting to see how he was able to pick up the information from the environment, and also what was still on it. But interestingly, though, he did make a connection, again, a personal connection with something at the site in Donegal. This was a site which has left a lot of Ireland with some pain. It's a site that has, well, let's just say it has left most in Ireland with memories of something that went on on the 17th of March 1972. But needless to say, he picked up on something, and he asked it to come back to the house. I never gave it much thought. The following day, we were standing outside in the courtyard. We were laughing, we were joking around, when suddenly the dog, Max, he started acting strangely. You know, when it's your own animal, you get used to him. You get used to his quirkiness, what triggers him, what doesn't. But this was out of his character, and He jumped up and started to go toward the back fence, and then he suddenly started barking, as if someone was there, someone he didn't know. Moments later, Dawn almost hit the ground when this particular spirit came from Donegal and interacted with him in front of us. It was a very overpowering experience for him. He had to go into the house to settle himself again, but strange nonetheless. And Max was even shook up. He kept watching the back fence. He patrolled the perimeter almost. But strange. But needless to say, his spirit guide never showed up. Day 3. This was the most impressive day, because we ended up going to Lachine, which is in County Sligo, right against the coastline. And this place for a long time was known as a haunted house. But a haunting with a difference, because it's not something that you would tend to pick up on, because the place is a ruin. Trees grew out the middle of it. And really what I was expecting from Don, if he was to use his sensitive abilities, was he maybe would have told me there was a ghost of a butler, or maybe a maid, or something like that. Something that would typically be picked up on, especially with a haunted house, but that wasn't the case. Don started operating in Don's way. And without the aid of his spirit guide, he started pulling information from the environment again. Information which I held in my top pocket in a sealed envelope. And he started talking about Egypt, a connection with Egypt. And this is something which really you really wouldn't get from the house itself, even to draw a link with Egypt in the mainstream in Ireland. Certainly wouldn't be a typical link to be made. Then he started talking about artifacts, where the artifacts were kept, and what was actually happening in the house. The fact that this thing was so rampant that everyone in the house knew that it was there. It was terrifying. Now I knew from the work that I did that it was a jinn. And I knew that the owner of the house, Owen Phibbs, had brought artifacts back in around 1916 and kept them in the house. And the place was known as a museum. It was one of the first things that Dawn had mentioned. It's like it's a museum. Owen Phibbs brought these artifacts back, but there was something attached. This jinn was attached, and it went mad in the house. Destroyed everything. People couldn't stay there. It became known as one of the most haunted houses, certainly in Sligo. But it's still there. Don didn't know what he was really dealing with. He had never come across that before. Welcome to Ireland, where timing is everything. You get your timing right, yeah, then you'll start seeing things. That twilight between day and night is very important here. And certainly for that, it was very important. Even in its own nature, its confronting nature, it still served and can still serve a punch. And it's something that you need to be very, very careful with. As I said, Don didn't know what he was actually confronting. And he started getting a little passionate, let's say, about his work, and started confronting the entity. Both my wife and I retreated from the house because we don't approve of that. And we spoke about it, and the fact that if he continued, he could end up in some serious trouble. So we went back and we spoke to Don outside the house. We aired our issues, and he understood. But the entity had pulled back. Not because it was afraid of him, it was because it felt that he was below it. So I had to go back into the property, and I had to mediate between it and Dawn. And after around 5, maybe 10 minutes, it started to come back, and he started to interact with it. And I have to say, folks, it was one of the best examples that I have seen of a medium stroke sensitive. I know he doesn't like being called a medium, but it was certainly one of the best examples I have seen in a very, very long time. And the sites that we were going to, he did not know. He didn't know where we were going. He wasn't told beforehand. The only person who knew where we were going was me. The only person who knew the history within the team was me. So does Don know what he's doing? He does, to a point, I believe. I don't approve of the symbiotic relationship that he has developed with his medium. I don't approve of the symbiotic relationship which has developed between him and his spirit guide. I think the spirit guide is more of a crutch. I believe that Don has got exceptional abilities, which if he could really knuckle down on, he could harness to their full extent.